Alrighty, we are recording on behalf of the Board of Commissioners, the Auditor's Office, and Jason Semler from Baker Tilly. We wanted to welcome you guys all to this LIT workshop here. The purpose of this discussion is to talk about the components of LIT and have Jason answer any questions that you might have. If you recall, the Commissioner's Office had originally hired Baker Tilly to do this study on how LIT would impact, and finally we are here to get Jason in front of us, who's kind enough to join us from Indy to speak to the report that they provided. As a quick reminder, A, this meeting is being recorded, and B, we will be making all this information, including recordings and documents related to LIT, available on the auditor's website, which you can scan with your QR code or reach out to us, and we'll provide that to you. With that, I will turn it over to Jason.
I also brought hard copies with me of the PowerPoint. I know you had it in front. Does anyone want to? Okay. Yeah, well. So thank you for having me here this evening. And as was mentioned, this is, I know, supposed to be an informative meeting, so feel free. I want this to be conversational. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to stop me, as a question comes to your mind, and I'm happy to try to answer that, as we go through the schedules themselves. So I do want to, full disclaimer, what I'm going to go through with you today is current legislation, current statute on what the caps are, what the different local income taxes can be used. All this could change here in a couple of months. So I just want to put that as a caveat that this is kind of how the world is as of today, but it could change. As you know, as I'm sure you guys are following the various legislations that are out there now. But I think this will be a good foundation and hopefully helpful for you, as if things do change here in a couple of months, know what kind of options you do have available for the county. Sorry. So I'll kind of just turn to page 2. This schedule shows a combination of the various local income taxes. This page shows the various local income taxes that are available for the county to adopt, and I'll go through each one individually on the succeeding slides, but there's really kind of 3 different buckets of local income tax. And again, local income tax, I guess, take one step back. That's really a tax on the adjusted gross income for individuals who live in the county. So that's a key component. I know you guys already have an income tax, but it's not those who work in the county. It's not where you work, it's where you live. So that's important. And as you know, that I work in, on the economic development side as well. And that's something that we encourage. One of the reasons, main benefits of economic development, encouraging employment and new companies to locate in your county, is you hopefully those new employees build houses and work and really live in your county, because that's how you can collect the local income taxes for all the individuals who live in the county. So again, there's 3 different types of buckets. The first one is the property tax relief. The second one is what we call the expenditure rate. And the third is a special purpose rate. Within the property tax relief, the cap that you can adopt is a 1.25%. Right now, the county has not adopted a property tax relief local income tax. What they have adopted is, as you know, is the economic development of 0.5%. And you can see that's within the expenditure rate. And you can see within the expenditure rate, there's 8 kind of smaller buckets that you can adopt. And we'll talk about each one of these individually because each one is unique in what money can be used for, and then also who actually receives the revenue that's collected. But what's important about these 8 different individual buckets is the county can adopt any one of these 8 and in any percentage, but combined, they can't be more than 2.5%. So as mentioned, as you know, the county, you have the economic development income tax at 0.5%. So within that expenditure rate, you have the ability to adopt another 2% before you hit that ceiling. Sure. The property tax relief, that's really helps reduce property taxes. So it's not really any new revenue for the county. What it would be is basically you'd levy this income tax. Those in the individuals living in the county would pay that tax, and then it would be used to help fund your general fund budget, your other budgets that are typically paid from property taxes, and it would just reduce the amount of property taxes that you would have to levy to fund that same budget. So this is really not really the only local income tax. It's not really new revenue. You're just shifting how you're funding your budget, either for less from property taxes and more from income taxes.
So
no. Yours is not, and typically it is, but you have, Porter County has special legislation that the homestead is part of that economic development income tax. So your economic development income tax is like no other one in the county. Or the state, I'm sorry. They do have something similar, yeah.
But our local, we have offered a home.
That's true, but that is part of the economic development because of your special statute, but that's
Typically
correct, yeah. Yeah, there's a separate bucket for that property tax relief that Porter County does have because of the special legislation that you had created. It's within that economic development. And I'll hit on that a little bit more.
Is that homestead or the special credit?
It's the same thing.
It's the additional homestead.
Additional homestead.
Yeah.
Okay. Correct.
And is that part of the 2%, 2.5% cap, or is
Correct.
it separate from that?
It's part of the 2.5. And then the third bucket on the far right is the special purpose rate. Porter County does not have that. The counties that have that are those ones that needed additional revenue stream to build large county projects before they had the correctional split that you see their correctional rehabilitation facility. A lot of counties would go to the legislators and ask for a special purpose rate to help fund a jail. There's a couple of counties out there that ask for a special rate to help fund their courthouse project. Well, they would go to the legislators, ask for this additional rate to collect this additional revenue, and then they would bond with this new revenue. No, from special purpose, there's no ceiling. No. But because, probably, I can't remember when they did the correctional rehabilitation right there in the middle of there. The legislators, many counties were coming in to the legislators asking for this special purpose rate for these special projects. And a lot of them were jails here in the last 5 to 7 years. So they didn't want to, have that responsibility of, cherry picking which counties gets that special purpose rate and, authorizing a special rate for that county. So what they did was they expanded the expenditure rate and said, okay, that of that 2.5%, now we're going to allow you to have this correctional rehabilitation rate that can just be used for jail and jail related facilities. So you have the ability to adopt that rate, but it comes also within that 2.5% cap. Just counties. So now I'll go through each one of these because, like the correctional rehabilitation, the benefit of that is because it's just for jails and jail-related type projects. The county collects 100% of that revenue, so you don't have to share it with the other entities because it's for a county project. Correct. So in the expenditure, like I said, there's the 8 different smaller buckets, and we'll go through each one of those.
Hey, Jason, I have a quick question.
That's right.
When, just so I understand and everyone understands, when we go up, or if we were to choose any of the lits, what is the smallest denomination you can go up?
0.01%.
Okay.
So on the next slide, I put this together just to kind of show you the why, and it's a lot very colorful. Sorry. This looks at all 92 counties and at the various local income taxes they have adopted. And you can see from going from right to left, Porter County has the lowest local income tax rate of all 92 counties at the 0.5%. And then the range is all the way to 3%, which is Randolph County. So you can see there's a quite variety of where different counties fall within the spectrum of what they have adopted in local income tax. You can see the mean is about 1.91%, the median is 1.95%. And I can tell you that that's been gradually increasing every year as more and more counties have increased the various local income taxes. And I'll kind of, when we go through the individual ones, I'll kind of tell you which ones have become more popular here in the last couple of years.
How many of those counties are also required to take electricity from Belmont? Like where and like
not very many.
Where is Lake by the
I don't have that with me. I can find that, but I don't know exactly what their total rate is. But I do have that. I can get for you.
So not only do we have the lowest liberty in our state, but a good chunk of it is going to the RDA. So we're really operating very lean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll go through a pretty good portion of your local income taxes going to the other entity that's not available for you to fund your services, operating services, or capital projects.
In saying that, for example, Lake County is requiring about a full 1% of theirs is property tax relief. It's shifting the burden from property tax over to lit. So their lit is the same amount as ours if you remove the property tax portion.
As the presentation continues, half of ours is going to post additional. So effectively, the county's running on 0.25 plus our dues to the RDA.
Yeah, we'll have that on the schedule. Scott's exactly right. Really, of that 0.5%, 0.25 is really going to as new revenue for the county. Page 4, as we start talking about each individual bucket, and we've kind of hit on some of these already, which is great. As I mentioned, the property tax relief, kind of that first bucket, it's just really a credit on taxpayers' bills. So it just reduces their property taxes that you would have collected to help fund your budget. But now instead of funding your budget from property taxes, you're funding it from local income taxes. So it's a way to help reduce the property tax rate and the liability.
My understanding is that you're on Social Security, but the lit does not affect.
Correct.
Your Social Security.
Correct.
But because if we were
were to adopt, will paying taxpayers realize a relief in their property tax,
Correct.
even though they're not being.
Correct.
It doesn't affect Social Security.
Correct. It doesn't. Yeah.
Either on either, from either tax, like the late or the property.
Well, the property taxes are based upon a homeowner's assessment on their property taxes. So it has nothing to do with income. But the local income tax, if all your revenue, all your taxable income is Social Security, you would not be taxed on that.
So they're on they're not going to feel the increase or an increase. They will, however, be able to participate or
Benefit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. So a lot of counties that have this, one was, if you remember, I think it was back in 2000 when they eliminated, not special tooling, inventory tax. That was a pretty big hit to some communities' tax base that had a lot of manufacturing and had a lot of inventory. That was going to increase property taxes. So one way to help offset that was that they allowed counties to increase their homestead credits, property tax relief, to again offset that increase in property taxes that we were coming. So a lot of counties adopted that local income tax at that time in anticipation of an increase in property taxes. But you don't see it as much anymore, and the main reason is because it's not new revenue to the units. Exactly.
Let's talk about in terms of taxes in general. What is better for the taxpayer and what's better for the county? To have property tax or to have local income tax?
Well, from the taxpayer standpoint, it depends if you're land rich or you generate a lot of revenue. If you're land rich, you'd rather have higher income taxes than you would property taxes. But if you don't own very much land but have a high salary, you'd rather have higher property taxes. So it kind of depends on who you are. From the entity standpoint, property taxes are typically more secure. They're less volatile. I mean, if you think about the recession we had in 2008, we saw some significant, 10, 12%, decreases in local income taxes for a couple of years. Elkhart County was even hit harder just because of their tax base, as you all are I'm sure very familiar with. So from a unit standpoint, property taxes are more secure. If you're looking at bonding, property taxes are more secure. Income taxes are still pretty secure. We sell income tax bonds in the market, all the time. Oftentimes we'll put a property tax backup behind them like we've done here in York County because it makes the bonds more marketable because even the market feels that property taxes are more secure.
I have a question. My district where I live is primarily agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking on behalf of other farmers who probably take the front. I'm a farmer, being somewhat land rich. So how would that affect us? I mean, is it a wash for us because getting a break on the property tax, which they just recently increased, by the way, how they're taxing farmers, an increase. And so if we get a break there, basically, we're going to pay a little bit more out of the income, so we're going to get that either way.
Well, with one thing that with the property tax relief, if you did adopt that, the county also has the ability who receives that benefit. It can be spread out evenly amongst all the taxpayers in the county. You could just give all the benefit to homesteads. So that's another choice that the county has is, you can also somewhat dictate. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah.
So when you say homestead, we're talking about where individuals live.
Mm-hmm.
So on the other hand, if I'm a investor and I own a couple of apartment complexes on a half acre lot, I don't get that benefit.
You can structure it so they don't.
There you go.
you can structure it so they don't, but you can also structure where they can. So it's not as simple as, it's not typically a 1-for-1 where you're going to save $1 in property taxes and then pay more in income tax. The next page is starting with the expenditure rate and the 8 various smaller buckets within them. Typically, these are allocated by a percentage of the ordinance that you approve, the county council approves. And it can be, like I said, any percentage up to 2.5% within these 8 or 9 different categories. The first one I wanted to talk about on page 6 is certified shares.
I had a quick question. You keep saying 8 categories, but I keep seeing 7. There's only 7 in that list.
Let's see, I'm sorry, there is 7.
I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Okay.
there was 7.
I just want to make sure nothing was missing. Thank you.
The first one I wanted to discuss was the certified shares. It's one of the more flexible ones. It can be used for any general purpose of the county. It would be deposited into the county's general fund, or for the cities and towns into their general fund. It's distributed to all civil units that impose a property tax, except for schools. It can also be included to solid waste management districts if the county approved it. So this is important. Again, it's very flexible, but you share it with the most amount of other units. So there's more pieces to the pie if you were to adopt a tax rate.
So basically, townships would get something out of it.
Correct. Townships, libraries. The economic development, page 7. It can be used typically for any lawful purpose as well. It's distributed to the counties and municipalities, so the county and the cities and towns. So in this case, townships, libraries wouldn't receive any, where in the certified shares they would. As we kind of have already alluded to, Porter County is a little unique because of its special statute. The first 25%, or really basically half of what you receive at that 0.5 gets distributed to the county and the other units. The next 3.5 million, the other 0.25%, that gets distributed to any regional development authority. And then anything that's remaining at that 0.25%, as was mentioned, is passed through to as homestead credits to help reduce the property taxes. If you wanted more to go to homestead credits, if you just, I would have to think about that a little bit more. We might want to put it towards the property tax relief. One, this is special legislation, so we would have to go to the legislators and ask them to amend what you've already approved. So that's an extra step that you don't have control over. The other thing that I would want to think about is if we took to the property tax relief bucket, that gives you probably more flexibility on how you can distribute that property tax relief if you wanted to. The other benefit that I would really like is if you adopted it here, it counts toward that 2.5% cap. So that would limit you from being able to adopt one of these others that gives you more flexibility that you might not need now, but you might need in the future, where we'd want to put in the 1.25 that doesn't hurt this bucket. So I know we've already talked about this a little bit already, but I'm happy to stay on this a little bit more just because this is unique for your county.
Jason, I got a question. Sorry. Again, if I read that correctly, if we just took a 0.25 economic development, then the other portions then don't trigger into homestead and RDA?
They do.
for your economic development, the way the statute's written, they would. Yeah. So if you wanted to increase the economic development, like I said, normally in the majority of other counties, economic development, just 100% of it gets distributed to the county and the cities and towns in proportion to their levy. So if you wanted to, and right now the statute says you can go up to 0.5, you're at your max 0.5. If you wanted to increase the edit to 0.6, I think we would have to, and I'll defer to the attorney, but I think we'd have to go back to the statute and have them amend what you currently have to allow you to do that.
Got it. Okay.
Look, 3.5 million is going to spread out for RDA no matter what.
Yeah, and maybe for some context, the 0.25 approximately produces what gross in 2020?
I have that here. About almost 18 million.
So if the context is this, the second 0.25 to get our 50 basis points, that second 0.25 is creating $18 million. Yes, 3.5 goes to the RDA. The remaining is going to the additional homestead credits. That is the giant pot of money that goes to the additional homestead credits. So I don't want everyone to have the impression the RDA dues are eating up that 0.25. They're eating up 3.5 million, but it's creating 18 million. The remaining of the math is going to the additional homestead credits already. So when we say the county is running effectively off of a 25 basis point lift, that's the underlying logic. So when we look back at the earlier slides, we're 0.5, but in reality, we're 0.25 of actual operational money.
Correct.
But we're sharing that money.
Yes, you're sharing that 0.25 with the cities and towns.
The original 0.25 is creating 8 million and change, and then that is being divided between cities and the towns and counties by population.
So you turn the page, the next kind of expenditure rate is the public safety. So this, as the certified shares and the edit is very flexible, can be used for any legal purpose of the county or the entities that receive it. Public safety is more restrictive. It is distributed to the county and the cities and towns as well. Within the public safety, the county does have the option to adopt what we call a PSAP rate, public safety access point, for counties that have those. The legislators realize that that's, when they try to consolidate those, there's still a couple of counties that have some municipalities that have their own, but they realize counties were taking on more of a burden on those operating costs. So the legislators allow the county to, within the public safety local income tax that gets shared with the other entities, other cities and towns within the county, they could carve out a portion of that called PSAP rate and then keep 100% of that to help fund just PSAP related expenses.
Do we have anything like that?
No.
So it wouldn't be valid here, but
Well, we have a PSAP. PSAP is our 911 center. I think what Bart was asking was, we have an arrangement like that where.
Oh, we don't have one. No.
no, but you could adopt this rate to help pay for your 911.
So with any public safety, that's a portion, not share, because we're the only one with PSAP. Right.
So you could adopt this local income tax rate, have a separate fund for PSAP, and then move some of your general fund expenses related to that towards this budget.
Only for dispatch.
Yeah. Right. So you want to be, we want to calculate how much, you don't want to generate more revenue than what expenses you have. It's just not efficient.
911 division doesn't get any funding because it's not a peace town. So I don't believe they would be affected.
Yeah, Chester's in a quarter. The actual police dispatching, to my understanding, for Porter and Chester's being done out of Porter.
Correct.
We do their fire, but we don't do their police.
Correct. And I believe this is a question.
I just want to, can you explain or clarify, if you do a lit public safety, does it go to the cities and townships as well, or is it just to the county?
Public safety would go to the county and the cities and towns, but not the townships.
So the townships are left out of that?
Now, is there any mechanism that we may have available to us if we wanted some of that to go to the township?
Well, I'll skip to this slide right here. Slide 10. There are some statutes where you can, township fire departments, volunteer fire departments, they can come to the county and ask for funding. There's two different statutes that they can go through. One is where there's no limit on how much they can ask and how much you can give. There's another statute that it's based upon the land that they serve. But just like a township.
They can do that now.
Mhm.
If you
Yeah.
come to the county now and ask, they can ask.
Right.
What I'm looking for is a reoccurring. Can we, if we adopted this, we're going to carve out how much, 0.02% and what goes to the township.
I think you would need to have some kind of contract in place where there's benefit going from township to the county, that there's a reason that you're like they're providing some service for the county that you're not having to provide. Yeah, so that can be done, but I think it'd have to be done through a contract.
You agree with that? I mean,
Overall, the issue that we're running into is that in the public safety tax itself, townships don't have public safety function beyond fire, and right now fire is not part of it unless it comes through the contract. So, yeah, I think your question was, could we designate, make up a number also, $100,000 a year goes to XYZ township, and this is part of their budget coming through the public safety tax. Yeah, I don't believe we can do that. What we can do is say, you particular township are engaged in fire fighting activities. You have a contract or you're doing it. We are now going to participate with you in that, but it won't be the set it and forget it budgetary number. It would have to be based upon that fire relationship.
So as long as they're providing that service.
Correct.
So it basically would be like any other contract, they're
Right.
contracting, we're contracting with them to provide a service, but in this case, the funding can come out of the public safety.
Correct.
Now, that'd be coming out of the county's portion, though, would be coming off the top, where if these this page 10 that I referred to on the volunteer fire departments and township fire departments, if you were, let's say, township came to you and said, we need $1 million for a new fire truck, and you said, okay, we think that's a valid use, we're going to give you $1 million, that would come off the top before you distributed anything else to you or the other cities and towns in the county.
You're saying that's a yearly.
That's a yearly ask.
That's a yearly negotiation / pact, and that's a very critical point you pointed out. If we were to go down this road, which is possible, obviously at this point, those numbers are coming again off the top, and what that before division, so that all of us, Porter County proper, would be sharing in that expense that we were sharing with that township. That makes sense? And we would have to do that every year.
So even if you had a contract with a specific township, it's nothing that's sustainable from year to year.
It would be year-to-year decision, so it would be sustainable in that manner.
But it's somewhat problematic because you're asking the municipalities, especially those who are providing fire services for their citizens, to also give some of their revenue away.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
And if there is, I believe the certified shares have some additional options to get to the township, correct?
Yes.
Now, that's more set it and forget it option for those looking for township avenue for
Say that
funding.
again, Scott. The certified shares.
Certified shares is better run.
The certified shares is the option in which we share more with entities beyond the cities and towns and ourselves. The township would be part of that number. That would be that traditional, they know, Porter Township knows they're getting X dollars or close to it every year. That's that option.
Yeah, if you turn to page, I think it's 15 and 16. This is a good illustration, I think, what we're talking about. This looks at if you were to adopt a 0.1% local income tax at the various different buckets, who would receive the benefit and how much. So if you did certified shares, we were just talking about that has the most amount of pies. You share with the most. So 0.1%, if you look at the second page, 0.1% brings in about $7.2 million. So you can see as certified shares, the county receives a little over $1 million. Valparaiso, the cities and towns, schools, townships, they would all receive some. But then if you adopt the public safety, still at the 0.1%, the total still, it's over $7 million. But as you can see, since it's only spread amongst the county and the cities and towns, now the county shares, $3.2 million. But the townships aren't receiving any. So again, it's what are you trying to accomplish also helps determine which local income tax is best for you to adopt.
Jason, on the certified shares, from the library standpoint, there is or isn't any control over the percentage they receive.
No, it's based upon the levy.
So when are certified
It's based upon the levy.
So the certified share option, school corps, the two library entities would receive funding by statute, and if we wanted to add the townships, we could.
For certified shares, the townships would automatically receive some.
Would the county have the ability to eliminate?
Who receive?
They could want to eliminate the schools from certified. No. I'm just using them.
And within the certified shares, we're showing that I take that back. There is an option within certified shares that we might be able to, where the schools, because we'd have to look at we used to have Cadgett counties and Cowett counties. Since you've just been at it, you've never had been one. If Cadgett county's schools did get a portion, but it was more like just property tax relief. It's not really new revenue. Cowett county schools don't receive anything, just the cities, towns, townships, and libraries. So we might have some flexibility there.
I see that what is, and what kind of county are we?
Well, yours is Connecticut County. Most counties back in the day when they adopted the income tax, they adopted, it's called Cadgett or Cowett County Option Income Tax, or County Adjusted Gross Income Tax. And depending upon both of those, they were still submitted to the general fund, directly to your general fund. But schools did receive a portion of the revenue as property tax relief, but the Cowett didn't. So since you have not had that choice yet, you might be able to have that choice between the two. So that's something we could look at in more detail.
That's a very big question. As the certified share is split, given the economic development limitations that we have, the school corporations, I mean, I think this is a good illustration to show that basically the 0.1 is going to produce about 7.1 million. This gives us a good breakdown of how that works with certified shares. So determining the school would make a long way to being able to dial these numbers in a little bit more effectively.
Yeah, I mean, not picking on the schools, but, the feeling is that, with the schools where the rest of us have not had that ability of the referendum. And certainly that's been exercised in many school districts here in the county. Townships, the rest of us haven't had that tool, which would be fantastic, just because that's voters. But we can't do that.
So that's something we could look at definitely more detail if we wanted to look at that route. And before I go to the correctional and EMS, I'll kind of go to what that can be used for. Let's see. Oh, I did want to go back to this slide. Just public safety is pretty flexible. So page 9 just lists, kind of the list from the statute on what public safety local income tax can be used for. But as you can see there, there's quite a few things that are currently in your budget that could be funded from a public safety local income tax. The next, we kind of talked about how you can transfer some of that revenue to the fire departments and volunteers. The next one is the correctional rehabilitation facility lit. I often call it jail lit because that was specifically, I think that the purpose of this new expenditure rate was to allow counties to adopt this to be able to fund jail projects. And you see their first bullet point, adopted by the county fiscal body, distributed to the county before any of the other rates are distributed, meaning the county receives 100% of it. It's at maximum 0.2% though, so of that 2.5, the most you can adopt is 0.2. Unlike the other funds that we've talked about, once you adopt those, they would go on forever until you choose to reduce them or eliminate them. These do have certain life periods, 22 or 25-year lives. That being said, and a couple of the other ones that you will see, a lot of counties are using these. One, we've done a lot of jails over the years. Typically, we would adopt a rate that's big enough to help fund the bond payments for the jail, but also help cover any additional operating costs, because that's also something important. And I'll tell you, regardless of what they say, if you're going to build a new jail, but yeah, it may be more efficient, but typically utility costs still are higher than what you currently have. So that's something we always try to include, is enough to cover any operating costs. So after that 20 years, 22 years, when the bonds expire and this rate expires as well, what's going to happen is those counties are just going to adopt the rate again for another 22 years. Either that or they're going to have some other revenue stream to cover all those operating costs they've been funding from this revenue stream.
Once it expires, then you have to take a break before you put it on?
Not under current statute, no. So, but it will be a decision that, the future council will have to make a decision, but looking at their budget at that time. The next rate, well, and I'll tell you, this one, of course, we have seen as I'm sure, seeing a lot of you in county conferences and know how many new jails have been built in the last 7 to 10 years. A lot of counties have adopted this to help fund jails and cover operating costs. So that's one reason that you've seen local income taxes increase over that same time period.
Would we be able to take a portion of the most recent bonds that are going towards the jail renovations? Would we be able to pay that out of this thing?
I think so.
I mean, that would be great if we could do that, right?
Yeah, if you understand the cost of building a jail, like Porter County's case, jail is in 2002. It was $22 million that was bonded to build that. I asked the architect today what that amount would be today to build that jail with the same material, same size, $100 million. So we were told.
Yeah,
We can't even renovate it for $22 million.
Now, in your case, we just issued bonds payable from property taxes. So if you were to, adopt this lit and use some of this to help pay for that bond, that would reduce the property tax levy that we would need to put in place. And that's another way of giving property tax relief. And that could be an annual decision, on the council. If you adopted this, because right now the bonds that we just issued are payable from property taxes. If the county decided to issue this jail lit rate, that will go into a separate fund, and you could budget part of that bond payment out of this fund. And then we wouldn't have to levy as much from property taxes. Because now we're paying some of that bond out of the local income tax, so we wouldn't need to levy as much from property taxes.
So we could essentially then pay current operating expenses for the jail. We could pay the additional renovation that we need to do that we weren't able to do in the first two bonds, as well as a portion of the payments for bond 1 and bond 2.
Now, the operating, you see that I think the one bullet point here, up to 0.2% of the adopted tax rate may be used for operating expenses. So some of it would have to be used for debt, up to 0.2%. But yeah, you could accomplish that and still, in effect, give property tax relief. Now, one thing I wouldn't recommend, I guess, is 1 year pay for half of your bond payment out of this, and then the next year none, because then your tax rate's going to go up like this and make it more volatile and harder for people to predict what their property taxes are going to be.
Why would the tax rate?
Let's say your annual payments, your bond payment for your principal interest is $1 million. So right now we're having to levy $1 million in property taxes.
So that's not what you're saying. What he's saying is we could effectively reduce the levy that's paying the extra money to pay for that bond. We can, but that's not, if we get rid of that or reduce that, then we're just trading dollars. That's all we're doing at that.
Yeah, because not until the bond is actually
Paid off.
gone does the property tax rate actually drop.
Correct.
So even though we would be, say, making the payment out of this, out of facilities, correctional facilities, that really doesn't change the property tax rate, not until you retire that bond.
Well, no, that's not true. Let's give my example. Let's say your bond payment right now is $1 million, and we're paying for a lot of property taxes right now,
which is 1 cent.
Which is 1 cent. So let's say that we levy this tax, and now we want to pay $500,000 out of the local income tax. Your bond payment is still just $1 million. You're paying $500,000 out of this bucket. Now we only have to levy $500,000 from property taxes. So now instead of having to levy a 1 cent tax rate on everyone in the county, now it's half a penny.
Yeah.
Now we only need to levy $500,000. Yes. You'd have to go in and make that decision.
But if and this might be an option to help pick up the slack where we're not getting in the property tax potentially.
The property tax caps.
Yeah, then if they're going to roll it back and we're going to lose revenue from property taxes, would this be a way to help offset what we're seeing? The lack, the lessened amount of revenue that we're bringing in.
It would depend on what that legislation does.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, and that's why I put that disclaimer. But no, you're right. With what is being proposed, some of the things, it's going to increase tax rates, and it's going to increase those circuit breaker losses. So anything that you can do to help reduce taxes, some property taxes somewhere else, is going to help you in the long run.
Yeah, but that's not the true intent of that legislation. True intent, I can read it right here, is to help you build a jail.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's why you have this, a time limits on this in 22 years.
Right.
You would have that if you're using this as a way to offset operational costs.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, that's going to be job.
Right. Now, you could have chosen, when we did those bonds, those two bonds, we could have looked at increasing the local income tax at that time. It was just the way you had existing bonds falling off, we were able to, yeah, and so there wasn't really an impact to the taxpayers because we just kept the tax rate level.
We're definitely going to want to model this next, so we can see which is a better way to go.
Yeah. And there's I think it's been killed, but there was some legislation, in the local income tax that allowed, cities and towns to adopt their own local income tax and change some of the caps. So I think that's been removed from any existing bill, but that is the thing might come back in another bill before the session's over. But yeah, I think, and that's one reason we didn't do a lot of scenarios for tonight. This is more just informational, because I think hopefully in May, when the session's over, we'll have a little bit better understanding of what those impacts are going to mean for you in particular, and then you can make more informed decisions on what of these options are best for Porter County. The next one's the EMS. This is one that I'm seeing more counties adopt here in the last couple of years, just because of the situations a lot of counties are finding themselves with their current EMS contracts or with hospitals. So I'm seeing a lot of counties adopt this. Again, it's adopted by the county. You collect 100% of it. It does have a cap of 0.2%. And it's limited for 25 years. 14 million.
Why do you think they limit that to 25 years? Because typically ambulance.
That I don't know.
Okay, does that preclude, at the end of that 25 years, you want to turn around and plug it in?
Yeah.
You could do
And how frequently can those rates be changed? So if you start this and then you have a renegotiated contract, like I think our contracts are 5 years, but you have a renegotiated contract for the ambulance, do you have the ability to up the rate?
You can make one change each year. So you could, every year you could make a change.
We're not there.
But like I said, I've seen this more popular just because of the operating needs of a lot of counties and the unique situations that you're finding yourself in.
We're looking to our current contract. And because of inflation, how COVID's changed workforce, it's going to be a lot more expensive. Your local county, for the counties for these bar graph you gave, it's number one. On that different color bar graphs are from where we're at.
Yeah. I see more counties adopting that one. I mean, from the conversations I'm having, it's just getting a more difficult expense to, and you said it's increasing pretty drastically. And especially, we're talking about legislation and we don't know, what's going to come out of that. But, the revised Senate SB 1, talked about, capping the maximum levy growth quotient to 0% for 26 and then 1% and 2% the 2 years after that. That's going to be devastating to you guys because, 4%, when we're should be getting 5% based upon the current, calculation, and you're only gotten 4% the last couple of years. Just imagine you not being able to increase your budget at all next year. I mean, everything else is increasing, 2, 3, 4, 5%. So I think that's going to force a lot of counties to revisit these local income taxes. And I think that might be some of the goals of some legislators is that they've said, well, I know, talking to David Bodoff and others, they've said they've given you this tool, don't ask for anything else until you've exhausted what we've already given you. So I think they're forcing your hand to increase some of these.
Well, there's no doubt about it. But I don't think they understood that if they did understand, shame on them, rolling that back 3 years. The departments that was going to affect the most at the county level was public safety and the highway department was going to affect the most. And so it's like, well, wait a minute. And then in our case, we got, at the end of this year, we know we have an increase coming. Plus, we're dealing with, if you're rolling it back 3 years, and 3 years ago, inflation wasn't as bad as it is today. But today, you're not only rolling it back 3 years, you've got the heightened cost of operations that didn't exist even 3 years ago. It would have been catastrophic.
The other thing that I know I'm kind of getting off topic a little bit, but I think it's important. I want to bring it up to the council, especially new members, that I think is kind of getting overlooked in some of the discussions is they're looking at cash balances and maybe how healthy they are. Well, I think this is not, if you think about the last couple of years with the ARPA funds and how much interest earnings you've earned this last couple of years, a lot of counties have much healthier cash balances now than they've ever had or have in a long time, just because of those two unique things. So to take a snapshot right now and say, hey, look at all these healthy counties, if you hadn't had those two very positive things, I'm sure your balances in other counties would look much differently.
We would have had this conversation.
Yeah.
If it weren't for American Rescue Plan. Yeah. We would have had to.
Hey, Jason, I got a question on the EMS lit.
Mm-hmm.
Across the state, have you guys seen any increase in counties or municipalities doing it themselves rather than third partying out, or just it, or is it just to take a little bit more to pay for the services that you're pretty much already?
I haven't really been in any of those conversations. I know when I've helped with long-term financial planning, and I've heard, I think similar conversations that we've had tonight is contracts are up, or and they've been increasing quite a bit, and they're struggling to find some companies to even provide those services in some counties. But I have not personally been involved in any conversations where the counties are starting to take that on themselves. But I can definitely ask.
I was just wondering, I know we kind of did a real quick analysis, and the cost with that is quite extensive, which is pretty much the only reason you would take the 0.2, the full amount, is if you were probably going to do it yourselves, and unless you have a really, really big county. But no, I was just wondering if across the state you'd seen just people, counties just upping it just to pay for their normal services, or if they were trying to take it on themselves.
I think most are just trying to increase it just to pay for their increased contract costs that they're seeing as their contracts run out.
Well, in our county, we certainly have our set of unique problems that the municipalities don't have. Like running the jail, running the juvenile services center, taking care of 800 miles of county road, as an example. However, we're looking at this because we have, many of us have spent time with municipal officials and understand the plight that they're under. And much of it is at public safety, within public safety. And from what I understand, it's not so much in inadequate staffing as it is just being able to pay people to hang on to it. Because everybody around us has this public safety tax, so we're having to compete with that. And which I can tell you, I mean, just these last, you really seen it excel in the last 4 or 5 years. It seems like of losing them to, it used to be if you lost an officer was either got out of they got out of the line of business, or they went to Florida or Texas where it's warmer. Now we're losing them to adjoining counties and some of the cities as well. So, I mean, if you're paying attention, you understand why. I mean, you see the difference from what we paid for a SWAT car 5 years ago to what we're paying for a SWAT car today. What we pay for training, all of it. It's just, it's kind of surprising that we haven't had this discussion much earlier than we're having now. But it's because we tried to run county government from a conservative fiscal And that's a good thing. It could be a bad thing. Because now we're trying to catch up with some of the issues. And as I just spoke about a few minutes ago about the cost of a jail, if we were to build that jail, but we can't renovate for what it costs us to build it today. So, but my point is, I think if county government does this, it has to do it with the mind that it is to help our county. You can't do that without including this in the townships. You just can't. Because those are our communities. So anyway, go ahead.
The next local income tax is the judicial, and this is kind of relatively new. It came out a couple years ago, and they really restricted it. It was more broad the first year, and then the second year, I think it was last year, the year before, they restricted it where, again, this is a rate where if you adopt it, the county collects and receives 100%. You don't share it, but you can see that fourth bullet point down. It's very limited. It can only be used for staffing costs related to court reporter, court bailiff, court administrator.
Yes, Brian, if you would take a look at, see what that. Porter County. Did you have a chance to look at those numbers yet, Ryan?
I have not, Barb. But yeah, I will look into, again, with the very specific things that you could use it on. I don't know if I just don't know if there would be enough in our county to meet the need of it. But yeah, I will definitely find the total number out.
Since there's no mechanism for funding roads, it seems like any place that we can get relief off of the general fund or that, that we can use SLID for.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
The other restrictive thing on the judicial, if you look at the next bullet point, you can't fund more than 50% of the budget of those limited expenses. So it's limited, and then it's 50% of that. But it is an option to look at. The next one, I won't go into too much detail. I didn't look to see if your hospital.
Before we jump on judicial, on the fund, the courtroom costs, is that the building itself or interior, or do you know?
No, it just the staffing costs of the court reporter, court bailiff, court administrator.
Okay.
It's,
So it's no
It
building.
says fund courtroom costs, which includes, but it sounds like it includes other courtroom costs.
no, that's poorly worded. It
Okay.
means just those things.
How about, and I know this is in the nitty gritty, but like stuff for the courtroom, the technology, no.
It was more
Well,
broad
for the-
originally.
For everyone, our judicial budgets are very small because they only have these things in them. So the things that we could apply judicial lit to is exactly what's in our budgets. Not suggesting they are large because our courts basically have 3 or 4 staff in a court. But those are the type of things that are in the budget. It just wouldn't be a very large number.
Now, I know that there was discussion, and I don't know if this is going to get picked up on the bill or not, but I know from AIC, they were looking at maybe broadening this description of what it could be used for. But as a trade-off, let's say you had $100,000 of costs that would qualify under this, then the county would reduce its property tax levy by $100,000. That was they were thinking about proposing that. I don't know if that's going anywhere or not, but so from your perspective, it'd just be a wash, not really any new money benefit. But if you're trying to reduce property taxes, but still make it up, from local income tax, it gives you that option. I don't know if they're how detailed they're looking at these or not, but I do from David Budoff talking to him and us bouncing things off. I know he's, looking at the details and trying to how to be flexible and still accomplish positive things for the county. and giving you as much flexibility. So I know your association is. Acute care hospital, I won't go into much detail about this because it's no county has adopted this. This is relatively new, but it's basically where the county can adopt the local income tax and then they collect 100% of it, and then they basically use it for the hospital. And there's only maybe a dozen hospitals that qualify for this. Mhm. Yep. So here's the schedules that we've, I hit on before with the certified shares in public safety, but this just points out that if you were to adopt the correctional rehab or the EMS, again, at 0.1%, that's $7 million instead of spreading against the cities and towns or townships. If you collected all of it, you'd be receiving almost $7.2 million. And the next slide. Again, we're talking about taxes. If you were to adopt something new, it would be a new tax. So we kind of showed if you were to increase your tax by another 0.5%, what that means to a taxpayer at different adjusted gross income. So if you had an adjusted gross income, so this isn't necessarily what your salary is. This is what you report on your state income taxes after all your deductions and exemptions. If you report $50,000 of reportable income, you would see your income tax increase by $250 a year, lower $20 a month. And if you report $75,000 of income, you'd pay $375 more in income tax, and then you can see $100,000 be $500 with that 0.5% rate increase.
That's somewhat deceiving in that it's not straight. How much of a burden does it take off your current property taxes?
Well, it depends on which local income tax you would adopt. If you adopt, the only one would be is if you adopt your maybe current edit tax on your current statute or the property tax relief. But if you adopt certified shares or public safety or EMS, it wouldn't reduce the property taxes. Unless you decided to decrease your budget to table from property taxes by some portion. To talk about the approval process, usually you see it in two meetings. You kind of introduce the ordinance or resolution, and then you have a public hearing. There are forms that we would need to fill out. DLGF has good templates online that if you're interested, I can definitely direct you to those. If in this case, since we'd be adopting a new tax, we'd probably need to notify all the overlapping taxing units by August 1st, if this is something that you're interested in. Then
for it to take over.
I'm sorry, Ryan?
For it to take over in 2026, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So the effective dates is the next slide. If you adopt it between now and August 31, 2025, the effective date is October 1, which the effective date means basically when would taxpayers start seeing being taken out of their paycheck. So if you adopt it between now and August 31st, you would see an additional amount taken in your paychecks on October 1st. You wouldn't start receiving revenue until January 2026. If you were adopted between September 1 and October 31, you wouldn't see any impact to your personal paychecks until January 2026, but you'd still start receiving revenue in January 2026. And then if you wait till after October 31st, then you wouldn't receive any money until 2027. So if it's something that you're really considering, doing and starting to receive revenue for your 2026 budget, we'd want to get something approved by October 31st.
Everything closed on state day.
Yeah, into April.
so I'm demonstrating my head here. We do the certified share EMS or public safety, we really don't offset the property tax.
It would not.
Thank you.
I think none of these options are going to reduce the property taxes. I mean, we have an option, but it wouldn't create revenue. We have one lit option that would do additional credits on the property taxes. But whether it's certified shares, whether it's public safety, or any of the other options, if you want to say it this way, we are effectively paying for the part of government on local income tax and not property tax, which is ultimately what the state, through this tool bag, has said. We have these tools, use them to fund your local government in the way you see fit.
What you hope the taxpayers understand is that, county government or anybody at the city or the town level, they're not casting a vote to raise your property tax. We don't have the authority to do that. We appraise properties, assess value according to regulations and rules and processes handed down to us by the state of Indiana. The only unit of government that I'm aware of that can raise their taxes, but they have to do it through a referendum, are the school districts. We don't have that. We have not raised it. We have not touched income taxes in this county since 2007. That's 17 years ago. So everybody needs to understand, including the taxpayers, is that the decision, if we were to go forward with this, is really generational. It's not going to be raised again, for another generation. It really wouldn't. It really shouldn't be if things are managed here, correctly. And that's why we're here today. I believe we have managed county government responsibly. That's why we have the distinction of having the lowest income tax rate in the entire state of Indiana. And you don't get that out of accident. So, but I just hope everybody understands that this is not something that we haven't had this discussion since 2007. It's almost 20 years ago. So whatever we do here, we are probably going to have to live with it for another 10 or 15, 20 years, or at least 15 or 20 years. Whether we don't do it or we do it. And if we don't do it, to be quite honest with everybody, we are not going to, in my opinion, for what it's worth, we're not going to be able to move forward without some major adjustments here. We're just not. And you ask why? Well, because we're in the fifth or sixth fastest growing county in the state. We have to keep up with that. And we're dealing with the same inflation people are dealing with at home. When they buy eggs or they buy bread, when we buy pens, squad cars, and the rest, we're paying an inflated rate, and it's hard to keep up with. And we don't have the luxury when it comes to public safety to saying, we're going to cut the staff here a third. You can't do that. So I mean, it's or plowing the roads and fixing roads. It's just, it is what it is. I don't think anybody up here needs to apologize. We're just, our jobs are to deliver information to the public and tell them here's the state of the county. That's what we're doing. I agree. Unfortunately, we're going to have to do something. It's a long time not to do nothing.
Hey, Jason, I got a question. With looking at slide 3 here, what was on the screen, what do some of those counties do? Say SB1 passes and you've maxed out your lit. Well, what do they do?
Good question. Luckily, no one is at their at their max rate, like the 3% Randolph County, some of that's PTRC, so they're not at their 2.5. So they
Okay.
do have some flexibility. But I mean, with some of these counties, um, they're going to start getting close. If other things don't happen to help, ease some of their burden. And there has been talk about, because of some of the legislation that's being proposed, they know it's going to be cutting, your budget. We talked about the maximum levy. So there has been discussion about increasing this 2.5 to something higher. I mean, that's been a proposal in some of the legislation. That maybe is what has to give in the future as well.
I think Andy pointed out the largest increases here are basically all surround public safety.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, that is what has increased the most. And to be honest with you, public safety, part of it's the PSAP because the county gets to keep 100% of it. It's also public safety because it has the smallest amount of pies. It's also some of the biggest growing needs of the county, as you've mentioned. And it's also easier to, no one wants to pay any tax. But, if they know the tax is going to help fund public safety, whether it's, to make sure that, when you call 911, someone's going to pick up, you call an ambulance, someone's going to be there at a decent time, fire truck, police, they reluctantly are, no, like I said, no one's pay a tax, but they're reluctantly okay to pay for something related to that.
That burden or expectation goes far beyond what the house. We have to run the jail. We have to run the juvenile services. We have to run E911. So, of course, but the prosecutor's office. So there truly is a different definition of that. But from listening to what you were saying, reading the material you provided, I think you've done a great job of it. But that's my stuff. Is that I really think that where the rubber meets the road is our responsibility to properly explain everything to the public. If we've got to ask them for more of their income, we owe it to them to clearly explain why. And that's where the heavy lifting starts.
Hey, Jason, just to go off on the economic development subcategory and what it would take for us to be able to change that legislation, does that have to happen during the legislative session? So chances of that happening in this legislation are slim to none. So when is the next legislative session that we would have an opportunity to see if that could be changed?
You'd probably want to start talking to your legislators in October, November, or probably even sooner. So because October, November is when they start drafting the bills for the 2026 legislation. So then it wouldn't get, and if you were to get something passed, then you wouldn't see it until 2027.
And Scott, I think during the middle made a very good point that there's only 2 counties out of 92 that have this that's set up this way. I don't think that was the intent of the legislature to do that, but at the time, it just happened. So I don't think getting it passed is going to be any great feat. I think it looks to me as logical, commonsensical that it should be changed.
Quick question. On the lit public safety, I just want to clarify that also cover the ambulance contract, correct?
Well, we have an ambulance one that we don't have to share.
You mean the separate one?
Yeah.
Jason, is that?
Yeah, the public safety could cover the ambulance as well.
Like
It's an option.
it's an option.
Jason, one last question on the economic development. Beyond the special statute we have, is there, I think I heard you say we also are at our ceiling at 0.5?
I believe the statute says that it's 0.5. Your special statute says it's 0.5.
No, special statute doesn't have. So, give a little background. The reason why we have a special statute is we had to pay the RDA dues. Part of the way to entice us into producing an additional revenue source is they carved out a special statute that if we passed additional economic development, we first paid the RDA dues and the remaining went to the additional homestead credits. I believe the statute doesn't have the amount in it.
You're right, it doesn't.
So my question, is there a 0.5 limit? Do I have an overhead limit, or is the problem simply that we're still under the special statute?
No, I apologize. I was thinking that you did have a 0.5 limit, but no, you're right. It's you're not limited to that 0.5, but if you were to increase it, half of it would go to you, 3.5 million would go to regional authority, and the others go to homestead.
Kind of wrap up, the only real language change in that statute would be in the special statute if it just said the next 0.25, which we did, and then we're back to normal. That would be all it would take. It's the point of it in the time was you pass an economic development, and we'll allow you to use it for homestead credits to reduce your property tax load. I actually think our county representatives at the time were specifically requested that language because it was, again, to help the property owners with property tax relief. But it was written in a way it was whatever you pass, it doesn't have an amount. So it's still open-ended. So when you read it, it still feels as if we pass an economic development, you pay RDA, well, we did that. The remaining go to homestead, and it would go to homestead. That's the one, if we just could add either what you've already passed is this, and we don't have that option anymore, or not a big language change, it really only does affect us. And as Commissioner Davis pointed out, it's just a timing issue. It wasn't the point. I don't believe the state has any intention of us not having that option. It's just a byproduct of legislation getting passed in 2007.
So the first 25 basis points we use, it's economic and it gets shared just like any other would. And then the second 25 basis points, 3.5 million. Now, did it specifically say 3.5 million? Was that number? Okay, then anything above that, and that's the number that shrinks and grows depending on what that 25% is generating, correct? So then any additional monies above that, we just want to go back to what it was in that first 25.
Correct.
But that would take a legislative change, right?
Correct.
So we have to understand all the different options that we have because that would take a legislative change.
But like Jason said, LIT can also be discussed every year and changed once every year. So even though maybe it's not an availability for us in 26, it could be availability in 27.
Does anyone else on the call have any questions for Jason? Hearing none.
Anybody else have any questions?
I got one, which might be a little different. I'm looking at this in a little different manner and a whole looking general. Do we know what the impact, of the TIF and all the countywide taxing jurisdictions on the county general fund?
Ryan, you have that number, right?
Yeah, so what we disperse each year to the RDCs on average is 21 million. While that is collected revenue, that is not revenue that we, the county, get to see. So yeah, so total each year we bring in almost 90 million and then lose 20 million off the top to the RDCs and TIFs. So we are only really collecting about 70.
How about the projected impact of transit, oriented development? Does that have any significant impact that we know of?
The TDDs?
Yeah. Everything.
Well, they're not active yet. But once they get active, that number's going to be significant. And just wanted, Ryan,
real clear. You said we collect 90 million, what was the number?
90 million, and then we lose 20 off the top to tips.
Okay, let's make it clear. County government's not keeping all of that 70 million. Don't we distribute some of that as well? Or are we?
No, we distribute a lot of that as well.
Yeah. The municipalities with the county.
Correct.
How much is left for Porter County government after all the distributions have been made?
We get about, I think we get 40 million for the general fund.
This is after we distributed to the municipality. That's our share.
Yep.
It's less than I thought.
And just because I work on economic development, I want to make sure it's clear that if you didn't have the TIF areas, and I'm not familiar with the TIF areas, I'm somewhat familiar with the counties, but and we do work with some of the entities in the county and the TIF areas. But if you didn't capture the $20 million in TIF, your other budget would still be around $70 million, a little bit more because your CUME funds would receive a little bit more. But I just want to make sure it's clear that if you didn't distribute that $20 million of TIF, then you get $20 million to the county to the other units. Yeah. Well, no, if the TIF didn't capture that $20 million, because TIF really captures assessed value. So if there were no TIF areas, your budget does increase by $20 million. It's just all that assessed value that goes to help fund that $20 million, it gets added to your tax base to help reduce tax rates. So it's kind of like all those people that are paying their taxes, instead of going to the RDC, it would go to your budget. Your budget doesn't change, it's just everyone else pays a little bit less to fund your same amount.
Because county currently operates not much bigger, well, it's not much bigger of a footprint in this building. Whereas you take some of that city of Valpo, I think the last one was 14. I think 16 in total, but 2 were inactive. But
Generates like $6,000 to $8,000 a year.
and the municipalities are going to have work with. That's where the businesses are at. I don't have anything else. But before I go, I just want to make sure that I want to thank the Board of Commissioners. I want to thank the County Auditor's Office, David Ryan especially too, as well, for bringing you and Jason, Baker Tilly.
And they've been very helpful, so I appreciate their help.
We appreciate this. At the end of the day, whatever our decision may be, I hope it's based on the quality of information we have, and we've been willing to reach out and get. Unfortunately, because of the topic, what's the right answer? I don't know. But I do know we'll get closer to that answer the more information. That's why this is so critically important. That I know a lot more than I did.
And on behalf of the council, because let's face it, when it comes down to it, we're going to be the ones ultimately making that decision. However, working with the auditors and the commissioners, I think between 3 entities, and even the treasurer for that matter, we should come up with a plan that will benefit our citizens here in Porter County the best we can. And that's the best we can do. It's once again, 2007, 2025. So let's look toward the future and do what we can. And thank you for coming.
Well, and I appreciate and enjoy, being here and talking about this stuff, because this is what I do every day. And I know when you had hired us a few years ago to kind of look at a long-term financial plan, and I think that kind of, opened some eyes and started us to think, more long-term, and not knowing what's going to happen with this legislation. I think that will be, and not trying to sell our service, you don't have to use us. I mean, you guys, your staff at the R's office is great. I think that's what you need to do. You need to help justify to your taxpayers is look out 2 or 3 years and, see where you think you're going to be. And I think that will help answer questions to yourself, but also your constituents and saying, this isn't what we want to do, but this is what we have to do and where we have to do it based upon where we think we're going to be, not necessarily today, but in 2-3 years from now.
Right. And another reason we're here is because of the auditor's office have gone under the way, I believe, and really have been honest about the numbers. The auditor we had before this, she was trying to warn us on her way out. She got exactly what Vicki said, was like, hey, we're gonna have to do something. And Karen's office has, with the commissioners, I think, as council would speak for themselves, we've asked, you're not gonna hurt my feelings where we at. And right now, the public needs to know this. I don't believe anybody serves anybody well to keep it going. We're running in the red. And we can't continue to do that and depend on revenue to cover that shortfall that we really should be betting on.
The auditor's office has made itself available to all commissioners at all times. I think they're getting tired of seeing me.
Not at all. Not at all.
People like to work for you guys or something. I'm back there so much, but it is important, like I said, between the 3 units that, once again, it'll be the county council who decides it, but we're going to ask for all the input that we can from everyone who has a really big stake in this from a governmental side. So once again, auditor's office, thanks.
Welcome.
No, and I mean, just so everyone is aware, unlike some, I guess some things happening in our federal government, I don't see Porter County in that way. We don't have a true expense problem that, we so much need to cut. It truly is a revenue issue that we need to address. And I think if everyone keep that mindset instead of, do we have to cut? Do we have to do all these crazy things? No, I think we as Porter County are running very efficiently. It's just costs have gone up, prices have risen, and we just now need to, for the first time in, like, everyone said, in 20 years, actually, probably raise our revenues. So, but thank you to Jason for coming up today, and thank you for everyone for being a part of this, because again, without your guys' help, without you guys being involved, just falls on deaf ears and goes nowhere.
Yep.
Half.